On the third day of creation, God commanded, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. Genesis 1:11. Green plants are among the most important of God's provisions on earth. Every green plant is a factory that collects solar energy and uses it to manufacture food for itself, people, and animals. The branch of science that studies plants is botany, and the scientists who specialize in plants are called botanists. Discoveries of Christian Conrad Sprague. In 1787, after studying wild geranium in great detail, this guy exclaimed, "The wise author of nature has not made even a single hair without a definite design." Sprengel recognized that flowers are organs intricately designed for plant reproduction, and was the first to point out the role of insects in pollination. Sprengel was born in Germany in 1750. Although he studied theology and languages in school, he was an enthusiastic amateur naturalist, one who studies nature. After work as a schoolmaster and school administrator, he decided to devote his life to studying the wonders of God's plant creation. Through careful observation and experimentation, Sprague discovered that each flower's nectar-producing organs have a special color designed to attract various insects. Sprengel also discovered that insects transport pollen grains from one flower to another. He observed and outlined many complex details of plant reproduction and plant and insect interaction. Sprengel published his botanical studies and theories in his book, The Newly Revealed Mystery of Nature in the Structure and Fertilization of Flowers. All of his studies, Sprengel intended to bring glory to God for the wise design, purpose, and provision he placed into his living creation. 25 years after Sprengel's death in 1816, scientists began to study his long-neglected records and came to recognize the significance of Christian botanist work. As we study the plant kingdom, we discover that God created an incredible variety of design in flowering plants. The combination of colors, shapes, and sizes seem to be infinite. The diversity shows the remarkable ingenuity of the Creator. Despite their differences, all flowers generally have basically one design. All of the flower's parts are involved in its primary function, the reproduction of the plant. In the center of the flower is a vase-shaped structure called the pistil. The sticky top of the pistil is called the stigma. The large rounded bottom is called the ovary. In most flowering plants, the ovary is superior, attached above the other flower part, the petals and all that. But in some plants, the ovary is inferior, attached below the flowering parts. The stalk that connects the stigma to the ovary is the style. The ovary holds the ovals, which are the plant's future seeds. This is when the ovary is below the petals. Above and below. Parts of the flower you can see here. One or more stamens surround the pistil. A stamen consists of another top of a thin stalk called a filament. That's these parts right here, the parts that go up like this, right here. Those are the stamens. The anthers produce pollen grains. As you examine flowers, you will find that not all flowers have both stamen and pistils. Flowers having only stamens are called stamenate, and those having only pistils are called pistillate. Surrounding the pistils and stamens are the petals, which we see right in here. Or here's the petal, and here's the pistil, and the top thing is the stigma. The ovary is down here. The seeds will come out of there eventually. And these things right here, these like little cords that hold the fuzzy things that have the pollen on them, those are called the stamen. Okay, where was I here? Surrounding the pistil and the stamens are the petals, which often serve to attract insects or birds that pollinate the plants. Sepals are leaf-like structures that surround the base of the petals. The sepals enclose and protect the developing flower bud until it opens. Oh, that's the part that's like this, and then the flower bursts out of it and opens as a fully formed flower. The pistil, stamen, petals, and sepals are attached at the receptacle, which is right down here. The enlarged upper portion of the flower stem. Okay. That is an experiment. Here we go. Pollination and fertilization. Pollen is useless to a flower unless Pollen is useless to a flower unless pollination and fertilization occur. Pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. Fertilization is the uniting of a sperm cell of a pollen grain with an egg cell of the ovary. This leads to the formation of a seed. Both pollination and fertilization are crucial in the reproductive cycle of a plant. That's an answer. This is part of an answer of one of your questions. Without pollination, the egg cell could never be fertilized. Without fertilization, a seed could never form. God has designed plants so that they can be pollinated and fertilized by only pollen from the same kind of plant. For example, daisy pollen cannot pollinate and fertilize a sunflower. The process of pollination. When a plant's pollen is mature, the anthers open, exposing the pollen grains. The wind may help carry the grains to the sticky stigma during pollination. Insects like bees, moths, ants, bats, and some kind of birds are pollinators because they also aid in pollination. Most pollinators are drawn to the color and the shape of the petals or to the scent of the flower's nectar, the sweet liquid that is stored at the base of the blossom. While pollinators are collecting pollen and nectar to use for food or to make honey, some kind of pollen grains stick to the animal and are carried away to other plants. Provisions for pollination. It is interesting to see the many ways that God provides for each plant to be pollinated. For example, the stamens on alfalfa, which is a grass, blossoms stay curled up in a bud until disturbed by insects seeking nectar. If an insect touches the bud, a trigger mechanism causes the stamens to rapidly uncurl and release the pollen grains. There's such an excess of pollen that the flower usually undergoes self-pollination, being pollinated by its own pollen. Many insects avoid alfalfa blossoms, but the pollen shower does not seem to bother leafcutter bees or alkali bees. This is a little brain bite right here. Because most pollen allergies come from the wind-borne pollen grains, plants with bright, showy flowers are usually pollinated by insects and rarely cause allergies. Once an alfalfa flower has been pollinated, its blossoms quickly lose their scent, thus encouraging bees to travel to fresh alfalfa blossoms in search of nectar. The bees activate the trigger mechanism on new alfalfa blossoms. They deposit the pollen from the previous flower onto the stigma of the new flower, and this transfers the pollen from one flower to another, and it's known as cross-pollination. This process of self-pollination and cross-pollination continues until all available flowers are pollinated. The result of pollination. Once a pollen grain attaches to stigma, a wondrous thing happens. A pollen tube begins to grow from the pollens. There's the pollen tube. I'll keep going on the other page. Comes from the pollen. Sorry, let's see what that says. Result of pollination. Once a pollen grain attaches to the stigma, here's the stigma, a wondrous thing happens. A pollen tube begins growing from the pollen's location on the stigma, traveling through the style, remember that's the upright tube sort of thing, and into the ovary. The sperm cell, male reproductive cell of the pollen grain, divides to form two sperm cells. The sperm cells then move through the pollen tube, and one of them unites with the egg cell, the female reproductive cell, in the ovule, causing fertilization. The other sperm cell helps produce food storage tissue and that the developing plant will use later. The fertilized egg, the egg cell and sperm cell combined, divides to form the embryo, which is the beginning of the new plant. Crazy, this is awesome. Okay. Seed development, primed for growth. Each seed is a powerful growth package with three main parts: an embryo, an endosperm, which is stored food, and a seed coat, which surrounds the embryo and the endosperm and protects the seed until it can grow. When the sperm cell unites with the egg, resulting embryo is a miniature plant made up of a plumule. The tiny shoot that will become the stem and leaves is a radicle. The small root that will develop into the root system, or one or two, is the cotyledons. Structures designed for food absorption and storage. The cotyledons absorb the stored food from the endosperm. The protective seed coat must soften by moisture before the embryo can begin the process of germination, the early growth of a seed. Plants whose seeds have only one cotyledon are called monocots, and those that have two cotyledons are called dicots. In most dicots, the endosperm is completely absorbed and digested by the cotyledons before the seed exits the parent plant. In monocots, the absorption of the endosperm, which is the stored food, takes place during germination. Dicots, such as beans, peas, and peanuts, generally germinate faster than monocots, like corn and wheat. So then this little brain bite says, the largest seed is the coco de mer, or double coconut palm. It is 18 inches long and has over 56 inches in circumference and can weigh 66 pounds. That's crazy. That's way bigger than your textbook. All right, food for all. The creators supplied the embryo with ample food supply, which is a starch, to keep it alive until it germinates and develops leaves to make its own food. When you eat a seed like a corn kernel or a bean, you're getting the nourishment of the embryo that would have been used to germinate. God provided that nutrition as a source of food for people and for animals. We also depend on the plants for medicine, clothing, shelter, and other good things. And then here's a Bible passage. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you shall be for meat," meaning nourishment. "And every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and every thing that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, meaning food, and it was so. Genesis 1, 29 and 30. All right, so let's see. Fruit protectors and providers. Fruits, protectors, and providers. After fertilization, a flower fades and it drops its petals. The ovary, where the seed lies hidden, becomes larger and larger as the plant develops a food supply around the seeds. When the ovary is full of developed fully and ripened, it is a fruit. Scientifically speaking, a fruit is the ripened ovary of a flower, whether it's edible or not. A fruit may be many times larger than the original ovary. Nuts, grains, olives, and some common vegetables like tomatoes, string beans, and cucumbers are all edible fruit. Milkweed pods are an inedible fruit, but they're really good for butterflies. So then this talks about another experiment. So we're going to go over here. Fruits are designed to protect the maturing seeds and help with the dispersal or spreading of the seeds after they have matured. If seeds were not spread over a large area, they would be stunted from competition with each other. The type of fruit determines whether the seeds are scattered by mechanical dispersal or by an agent dispersal. Mechanical dispersal, which means spreading, occurs when the ripened fruit bursts open and scatters the seeds some distance from the plant. This dispersal is common with plants having pods for fruit. For an example, an impatiens, the fruit explodes when it is touched. Oh, we saw these in Minnesota not this last year, but the year before. It was the leaf when you touched it popped open. I wonder if you remember that up at Tom's logging camp. Other plants use fruits to accomplish agent dispersals. Birds and many other animals become dispersal agents by feeding on the fleshy fruits like blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. Many of the seeds pass through the animal's digestive system unharmed or are dropped by the animal before even being eaten. Consequently, the seeds may be scattered far from the parent plant. There are other ways in which animals act as agents of dispersal. Small animals like squirrel often bury nuts, which are types of fruit that contain only one seed and that, if forgotten, may grow. Other animals carry seeds with them. Seeds with hooks, spines, and barbs, such as burdock seeds, catch on the animal's fur as it brushes against them. Later, the seeds are scraped or scratched off, and they are free to grow if the conditions are right. Wind also aids in agent dispersal. Many seeds or fruits have special equipment that allow the wind to pick them up and carry them far from the parent plant. Like, think about those helicopters from trees that spin, or a tumbleweed. Milkweed seeds and dandelion fruits have hair-like plumes that can easily be caught up in a breeze, and maple trees produce winged fruits, sometimes called helicopters or propellers. Other seeds find suitable places to grow after being transported by streams or rivers or oceans. Although the coconut, which is a fruit of the coconut palm, is a very large fruit, it also contains airspace that lets it float on water. Thus, coconuts might travel on an ocean current for several miles. The seeds of many waterborne coconuts eventually get soaked up with water and die. However, some coconuts are washed up onto the warm beach, where their seeds can sprout and grow into new trees. That'd be so cool to see. A bud is born. The early growth of a seed into a plant occurs through the process of germination. Seeds require three main things in order to germinate, which means to begin to grow: moisture, favorable temperature, which means the right temperature, and oxygen. Until these factors are present, the seed will remain dormant, which means like sleeping. A deep sleep. God has programmed a seed with the ability to remain dormant for long periods of time, from a few months to many years, until all requirements for growth are met. In temperate climates, such as North America, Europe, and Asia, seeds do not begin to sprout until spring when the ground becomes warmer. In tropical climates like Central America and much of South America and Africa, where the temperature is warm enough for seeds to germinate all year long, seeds often remain dormant until the rainy season brings sufficient moisture to the soil. So you see here's a seed. Now it's getting enough rain. The ground is nice and warm, and there's oxygen, obviously, and it starts to sprout. So this is called a swollen seed. That's the radicle. That's what will become the root, the little part that pops off. And then when it comes up, it's breaking out of that seed coat. Now it's got an established root system and it's coming up. And when it opens up, this is the plumule. I can't remember exactly how to say that, but the word's there. And now here it's becoming, here are the cotyledons. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that. And then it grows into a bigger plant. Okay, so here we are. We go up here. Some seeds contain chemicals to prevent them from sprouting until they have been exposed to cold temperatures or until there has been enough rain to remove the chemicals from them. The seeds of desert plants are designed with enough chemicals to ensure the plant will not germinate until there is sufficient rainfall to both remove the chemicals and provide the plant with enough water for growth and reproduction. Other seeds have an especially hard coat that must decay before the embryo inside can get adequate moisture to start growing. A swell start. In the first step of germination, the seed begins to swell by absorbing or soaking up moisture. Moisture helps oxygen pass through the seed coat, which in turn activates many internal processes like digestion and respiration, which is digestion is, remember, metabolization of nutrients, and respiration is like breathing, like taking in oxygen, and allows the embryo cells to rapidly grow and multiply. If there is enough moisture to support respiration, taking in oxygen, but not enough to allow germination to continue, the embryo uses up its food supply and soon dies. Downward growth. The second stage of germination, the embryo pushes the radicle, remember the embryo root, what will become the root, through the softened seed coat and into the ground. The radicle grows downward so that it can provide adequate water and nutrients for the shoot once it breaks through the soil surface. If the soil is so heavily watered that all the air spaces are filled with water, the embryo's oxygen supply is shut off, resulting in its death. It will die. Shoots away. The final stage of germination includes the emergence of the plumule, embryo shoot, above the surface of the ground, and the growth of the radicle into a root system. As the plumule grows above the soil, it develops leaves. Once the leaves form, they begin performing photosynthesis, the food-making process of plants. The cotyledons provide the food until the plant's roots and leaves have developed sufficiently to begin absorbing water, minerals, and food. Since the plant has used all the food in the cotyledons shrivel and die. When the plant is no longer depends on the cotyledons, it's a seedling and germination has ended. Life expectancy. Short-living annuals. Plants are often classified according to their growth cycles. A plant that develops from a seed, produces new seeds, and dies in a single growing season is an annual. A growing season is the part of the year which the climate conditions favor plant growth. So, Raina, all those pretty purple and blue flowers in Duluth in the big planter boxes, those are annuals. They only live for one season. These short-lived plants, including peas and beans and grasses, such as rice, corn, and wheat, are among the most useful to mankind. Two-season biennials. The plants that live through 2 seasons to complete their life cycle are known as biennials. Bi means two, like bicycle. two wheels by. These plants include thistles, carrots, beets, cabbage, lettuce, and many others. During their first year of growth, biennials form a ring of leaves that meet the base of the plant and a large taproot that stores food. During the second year, these plants produce shoots that receive nourishment from the food stored in the taproot, eventually producing flowers and seeds. Because we use their taproots or leaves as food, biennials are often harvested during their first year of growth, and we seldom see their fruits or flowers. So this is the taproot, right? It's a carrot. That the root is what we eat. If you left it alone, the taproot would grow smaller because the food is going up into the plant, and it would produce flowers for seeds. I always wondered how carrots reseeded, made more seeds. Long-living perennials. The perennials are plants that live from year to year and bloom each growing season. These trees are perennials that live and keep growing for many years. In temperate regions in the United States, the shoots of herbaceous, there we go. Herbaceous, which mean not woody, like not trees, things that are softer than trees. In temperate regions in the United States, the shoots of herbaceous perennials die during the winter and spring, and new shoots grow up from underneath the underground roots or stems. Buttercups and strawberries and daisies and goldenrods are examples of herbaceous perennials. Meet the families. The scientific term for a flowering plant is an angiosperm. Angiosperms produce covered seeds. The seeds develop inside the ovary of a flower. Non-flowering seed plants called gymnosperms produce uncovered seeds, like that form on a pine cone scale. Well, that's interesting. Like people and plants belong to families, botanists classify flowering plants into families according to the structure of their flowers and fruits. Learning several families will help you recognize many lovely plants in your backyard and neighborhood. Composite family. It is easy to see why asters and sunflowers and daisies and black-eyed Susans are all members of the same family. These and many other plants bloom in the autumn are members of the composite family, one of the largest families of flowering plants. The word composite means to put together. A composite flower is actually many small flowers grouped together into a head. Many closely packed tubular disc flowers form the head's center, while a showy petal-like ray flowers surround the center. The disc flowers of most composites have both pistil and stamen. The ray flowers are often either pistillate or neutral, having neither a pistil nor a stamen. Beautiful bloomers. The ray flowers of asters are usually purple, but they may be pink or white. Their disc flowers are yellowish. White asters are often mistaken for daisies. The oxeye daisy, which is the most common wild daisy, and most other daisies have yellow disc and white ray. So, here's the white ray flower, and the center is yellow. This is the disc. This is the ray. To distinguish between asters and daisies, know that an aster has several flower heads on its stem, but a daisy only has one. Well, that's good to know. Look at this. See, this is the stem of an aster. One stem. Flower, 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 flower. See how it all comes off of this one stem? Daisies, one stem, one stem, one stem, one stem. Black-eyed Susan is a composite with a yellow yellow ray flowers and a dark brown or purplish disc. Okay, so a black-eyed Susan would be black up here, and the center is almost black. It's either black, super dark brown, or purplish. Friend or foe. The yellow ray and disc flowers of the goldenrod grow in dense clusters along the flower stem. Some species of ragweed, a plant whose pollen causes allergic reaction in many people, resemble the goldenrod. While the leaves of the goldenrod are long, smooth-edged, those of the ragweed are deeply lobed and ragged. The goldenrod flower clusters are also denser than ragweed flower clusters. The pea family. Most plants of the pea family, the third largest angiosperm family, have flowers that resemble the pea blossom. Members of this family, also called legumes, get their name from seed pods or legumes that split along two sides when the seeds are fully developed. These plants usually have compound leaves made up of leaflets, like little leaves, in the alternating pattern. Legume plants help to restore the nutrient nitrogen to the soil in the nitrogen cycle. Legume plants help restore the nutrient nitrogen to the soil in the nitrogen cycle. That's also an answer to one of your questions. Plants in the pea family fulfill a variety of purposes. Ornamental legumes like sweet peas and wisteria, locust trees, mimosa trees often decorate yards, filling the air with a fragrance from their blossoms. God provided certain legumes for our food, including beans, peas, lentils, and peanuts. Alfalfa and clover are used to feed cattle. Honeybees use the nectar from the clover to make honey. Vetch is used to prevent erosion along the banks of roads and now lies many miles in the interstates and highway systems. So this little tidbit says tamarinds, a member of the pea family, are a favorite tropical fruit of the ring-tailed lemurs. Up to 50% of their diet may contain tamarinds. Tamarinds are like little baby oranges. The rose family. This is one of my faves. A plant with 5 white, pink, or rose-colored petals that form a cup-shaped blossom is very likely a member of the rose family. Plants in the rose family have woody stems and fleshy fruits, and the flower parts into multiples of 5. Oh, I didn't know that. Man's cultivation of these plants yielded a wide variety of good things to eat and observe. See, there's strawberry here, pear, wild rose, garden rose. The rose family boasts more than 3,000 species, including the apple. Oh, the apple tree is part of the